and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. Today we're going to be talking about Providence by Kepnes. So let's just jump on into it. I pre-ordered this book because I had read one of Caroline's other books. It was a book called You, and it was so good. It's one of those books that I often think about because it really got under my skin. And I heard about this book here on the internet, and I thought, let's just pre-order it. So the first things first, it's very different from You. I know she released another book in between these two books, but I haven't read that one. But from what I've gathered on the internet, that there's a character in the second book that was in the first book, so that alone makes this a departure from her other work. And I have to say, this book is very different from You, but it's cool. I love seeing authors being able to branch out, show different sides of themselves, write different things. There's nothing more disappointing or boring than an author just kind of regurgitating the same thing over and over again. So right away, that gives it, a thumbs up in my book. So let's talk a bit about the story. Once I get a little deeper into it, I do give spoilers, but don't worry, I will give you plenty of time to click off if you don't want spoilers before I actually give them. So at its core, Providence is a love story. It's about a girl named Chloe and a boy named John. We follow them throughout many, many years of their life, but when we start off, they're teenagers, young teenagers. They're best friends. John's a little weird, but there's just something about him that's always kind of kept Chloe's interest. And they both have really intense feelings for each other, but neither of them have the courage to say it. Also happening because of John being a bit different, a bit nerdy, there's this one kid whose name is Carrig who picks on him just mercilessly. And, that really affects John. Then one day, quite out of the blue, John gets up one morning to go to school, I'm pretty sure is where he's headed. Either to school or home from school, I think. And he gets kidnapped. He just, poof, he vanishes. And Chloe, obviously and understandably, is very upset. Her and John's family, they set up vigils, they put up posters, they search for him. One of the things John loved was the daily newspaper. He just loved it. He loved reading it. He loved going through it. So Chloe, as sort of a way for her to still feel connected to him, every day she collects the newspapers and she puts them aside so that when he comes back, she can give them to him, because in her heart, she has to believe that he's coming back. So what happens next is we fast forward 4 years, and John is waking up he doesn't know where. He's in a hospital bed, but he knows he's not in the hospital. And he wakes up, and he sees that there's a book left on a table for him, and he picks it up, and it's a Lovecraft book. And he opens it up, and inside there's a note. And the note says something to the effect of, we did good work down here, but you're free now. You're free to go and explore the world and explore the new you, and you're welcome. So John's like, okay. So he gets out of bed, and he doesn't feel right. His body doesn't feel right to him. So he goes and looks in a mirror, and he sees that he's like a full-grown man now. He doesn't, obviously time has passed, but he doesn't know how much, and he can't remember anything about the time he's been there. But he looks in the mirror, he's buff, he's big, he's fully grown, but he doesn't know why or where he is. So he goes to leave, and he discovers that he's actually in the basement of the mall, and he guesses he's been there the whole time. And it's just so disturbing to him, just this thought of he's been so close to, the people walking around upstairs in the mall. he was so close to them. That's just a disturbing thought, being so close but so far away. So he goes up. Also in the note in the book was something about how he had been in a medical-induced coma while they were doing their work, etc. Like, it's just real vague and real weird. So he's upstairs at the mall. He needs to use a phone. He needs to call his family. So he goes either to a store or a restaurant, and he has to use the phone, and they're like, okay. And then I think it was a restaurant, and the waitress is like, wait a minute, are you John Bronson? Because of course everybody in town knew about him going missing. So he gets reunited with his family. He's questioned. They managed to figure out who took him, and who it was a substitute teacher at the school he went to. And they find out that this teacher had been fired from his previous teaching job because he'd been too weird. And yet this school where John went, they didn't do any research, and they hired him not knowing that he had been fired for just really weird things. So he gets home, he tries to get back into a normal life, but he starts to notice that people are having a really weird reaction to him. Like, his dad's dizzy all the time. Some people, when he approaches them, they get a nosebleed, and he doesn't understand it. So he kind of holds himself away in his room. While he was gone, his parents, his mom specifically, got a dog named Cody, who, she just loves, and she really put her time and attention into to sort of distract her from John being missing. And John doesn't want anything to do with the dog or anyone really. But then eventually one night he lets the dog in to his room. When he wakes up the next morning, he finds that through the night the dog has died. And he doesn't know how or why, but he knows that he's responsible for it. So now that he's back, Chloe, of course, is very anxious to see him. So she goes to see him, and as she's approaching him, her nose starts to bleed, and the closer she gets to him, the worse it gets. And when she gets a little bit closer, she passes out. And John's like, oh my God, and he just books it out of there because he knows it has something to do with him, even though he doesn't know why. He has no idea why he's having this effect on people. And he starts to see, like, okay, his parents seem the least affected by it. Probably because they're the closest to him, and they have a bit of a, I don't know why. They have a bit of a different connection, I don't know, but it just keeps them a little safer. So there's one night where him and Chloe have been texting because he's a bit too afraid to get too close to her because he doesn't want to hurt her. He loves her. But one night she finally convinces him that there's this pool party and he should come. And so he goes, and there's a lot of ruckus. What John doesn't know yet, I don't think, at this point, is that Chloe is now dating the boy Carrick who used to torment him. So John goes to this party. There's a lot of ruckus, and he feels his heart start to pound, and there's this one girl, one of Chloe's childhood friends, Noelle, and she comes up to him and she's yelling at him. She's like, you got to get out of here. Like, you have no business here. She's happy. You can't just come back and come here and think you can do whatever you want. On and on, just really obnoxious. And he can feel himself starting to work up, and then all of a sudden she drops dead. Just drops dead right by her pool. So he books it out of there. And what the police and the coroner and the hospitals and everything come to determine is that she had a heart attack. This young, healthy girl just had a heart attack. And so they're all really confused about it, but they just kind of chalk it up to a coincidence, even though John in his heart knows he had something to do with it without meaning to. There was something about the way his body was reacting and then how it affected her. So more time passes. I think now it skips to like 6 years later because he leaves. After what happened at the party, he's like, I can't be around anyone, so he leaves town. He doesn't tell his parents, he just leaves. And then it skips ahead 6 years. John has found a job delivering newspapers, and he tries to make it so he only goes out in the like wee hours of the night / early hours of the morning because there's less people for him to come in contact with. The police are starting to, so we also start getting this perspective from a police officer named Eggs, because his last name is like De Benedictus, so Benedict Eggs, his nickname's Eggs. I think True Blood did that joke too, but so he starts taking notice that there have been like 7 people in this town. So where John moved is Providence. Like 7 people have dropped dead of heart attacks, like in their front yard, walking down the street, doing nothing. And he's just, there's just something, it's not sitting right with him. Like 7 healthy people in his city have just dropped dead from heart attacks. Like, what? That's not a thing. So John, you know, as he's living his life, he's delivering these newspapers, he's trying his best to not have contact with people, but like he's got to live, right? He's got to make money and be able to afford an apartment. So these have just been instances where he's just run into people. There was one instance where he goes to like a restaurant, and there's a young man and his girlfriend there, and John accidentally bumps the young man, and the young man, for whatever reason, just loses it and starts pounding on him, just tackles him to the ground and is pounding on him, just swearing like, "Who do you think you are? Watch where you're going." And John, of course, his body starts to react and he can't control it, and the man dies of an apparent heart attack. So the cop, he's like, why? How? What is this? And he can't give up on it. His, you know, everyone's like, just give it a rest. It's all just coincidences. Like, just let it go. But he just can't let it go. His gut's telling him, no, there's more to this.
Trixie! I'm trying to film a YouTube video, Trixie.
So Claire, meanwhile, she has, she's always had a really beautiful artistic gift. And when John went missing, she really channeled her pain into her art. And she started by drawing pictures of him for the police. And then that really became, you know, a news story, like talented local artist girl drawing pictures of, you know, her best friend who's gone missing. And it sort of started a career for her as an artist. And she'd get art shows and things like that. Meanwhile, John's parents are really salty about this, and they feel like she has profited off their son's misery. And they feel like she's the reason why John left the second time. So that's a lot of what's going on. You know, you have John trying to live while missing and loving Claire so much. You have Claire, who's also trying to just live, making art, not understanding why John won't come to her. They text every once in a while, or no, they're not texting anymore at this point, but he calls her every once in a while, but he doesn't speak, but she knows it's him, and she doesn't understand why they can't be together. Of course, she has no idea why they can't be together. And then you have Eggs, who's out there trying to show that he's on the right path, that something is wrong and he needs to figure out what it is. And it's really just a compelling story. Like I said, it's so different from the book that I had read of hers before You, and that was fantastic. And this is also good. I think I would still say that You is my favorite of the two, but this was great. It was different than I expected. It kept me turning those pages, and I thought it was a good read. And if you're into stories like that, like I said, at its core, it's a love story. It's a story of requited love, but love that just can't be. So if you're a story of that, and then also add some sort of, you know, like supernatural elements, then I think you would love this a lot. So now I'm going to get into some spoilers where we can sort of talk about what happened to him, what's wrong with him, what is this effect he's having on people, and I'll tell you how it ends. So if you don't want any of those spoilers, click off now. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay. let's go down into it. So after a bit, John actually meets a girl, and she's one of the people on his paper delivery route, and they sort of hit it off a little bit. And at first he's scared, like as she's approaching him, he's like, no, and he kind of goes to get away from her, but he notices as she's coming closer to him, she's not being affected. Her nose isn't bleeding. She's not falling on the ground. You know, she's not dead. So he starts to think that, okay, this is weird. So he kind of gets closer to her. They go inside. They have a bit of a fun time together. He kisses her and everything's fine. There's this kind of sadness because he thinks like, oh wow, this is great. Maybe, you know, she's kissed me and now I'm fixed. Because she's fine, I'm fine, everything seems fine. And then the next morning he kind of ducks out on her, and he gets in his car and he drives to where Chloe is having an art show. And he gets there and he gets out and he goes to go in, and immediately, before she's even seen him, Chloe's nose starts to bleed and she hits the floor, and he's like, oh, fuck, you know. So he leaves, and she knows because of the reaction that it was him. She knows he was there. So after that, a little bit more time passes, and eventually he goes back to that girl that he met who didn't have a reaction to him. He's like, okay, why didn't she have a reaction? And he goes back, and she's pissed off because it's been like a month from this point, from the last time that she saw him, and she's real mad about it. And, you know, as you would be, because she says, oh, I thought we have a connection, and he kind of lies and was like, yeah, I thought we did too. And really he was just trying to see if eventually her nose would start to bleed, or he'd have some effect on her. Because of course, as we know, in her heart, in his heart, he's so in love with Chloe. So he goes back, and they kiss again, and they start taking their clothes off, and they're going to get intimate, and right before anything can happen, she dies right in his arms. And he's like, oh, okay. So no one's immune. Just for some reason it took her longer to react. She didn't have the more superficial reactions like the nosebleed or the passing out. It just went kind of like it did with Noelle at the beginning, just right to dead. So he leaves, At this point too, he's been searching desperately for the man who kidnapped him, Roger Blair. But he can't find the guy anywhere. And he tries getting in touch with people who know him, and no one's giving him any info. Finally, the one guy who he knows Roger, he goes to the man's house because, he tried to call him, but the man wouldn't take his calls. So he goes to the man's house, and through the window he's taking pictures of his wife, and he texts them to him, and he's like, listen, buddy, I'm here, your wife's here, if you don't call me right now, I'm gonna kill her. And the guy's like, bullshit, you're not gonna kill her. And he's like, I am. I need you to call me and tell me where Roger is. So the guy calls him, gives him kind of a runaround at first, and then he's like, wait, are you John? And John's like, yes. And he's like, okay, listen, I know what Roger did to you was awful, but I don't know where he is. And then John's like, I'm gonna kill your wife. And the guy's like, okay, listen, here's what I know. Here's the last known address for him. And I'm real sorry again for what happened to you. And John's kind of like, what did happen to me? And so the guy's kind of giving this rundown of what happened. And I don't know how it was done, but basically what it is Roger made John superhuman. If he gets an injury, he will heal. His body will heal itself immediately. And how he does it, I don't know how it does it, but what happens is he's kind of like an emotional vampire. So if he's around someone and his body needs something, whether it's to heal a physical wound or for something else, internal, emotional, whatever, his body immediately starts sucking the energy out of anyone that's around, and that gives them nosebleeds. It kills them, like gives them heart attacks, which is what kills them. So it's basically kind of like his heart attacking their heart and taking the energy from it. And John's like, oh, okay, like that sucks. So he goes to the last known address for Roger. Roger's not there. Roger's never there. He moves to the town. He stakes it out. He's constantly watching Roger's house, but nothing. Meanwhile, with Chloe, on the night of the art show, the one where John was, where she got the nosebleed, a different blast from the past had also shown up, and it was Kerrig from when they were kids. And they hit it off and rekindle their relationship again. She moves in with him. She starts painting again, this time landscapes, because of course, you know, you can't just keep painting John forever. He eventually proposes. She says yes, and they go home for their engagement party, and John gets wind of it, and he's gotten wind of it at the point where he's given up any hope. He can't find Roger. He finds out that the house has been sold a few months ago and is now just an Airbnb. It's like he's been staking this house out for months and no one's ever been there, and that's why. And then it just kind of spirals. And so because he's so desperate, he decides that he owes her an explanation. And he's read on the internet, because he's always, you know, keeping tabs on her. He gets Google alerts on his phone if there's any updates on her, and she was in a Nylon magazine article, and that's where he read that she was engaged to Kerrig. And Kerrig, I don't know, every time I say it I think of my coffee machine, like the Keurig, but it's not spelled like that. Keurig. So he goes home. Now he knows he can't just walk into that party, because first of all, he'll kill people. Second of all, he's just, you know, he just can't. Like, that's tasteless. So he finds himself an area where he can be separated from her. He's kind of like in a part of a room and there's a glass door, and then he texts her and says, I'm here, could you please come? It's down in the bottom basement of the mall where he had been held captive. So she's like, oh my god. So she gets in the car immediately. She gives an excuse to Kerrig, and she goes to the place where he is. And she goes in, and, you know, she's like, John, what are you doing? Why are you in there? What are you doing? And she's like, come out, come to me. And he tells her all about it. He tells her what happened, what's been going on, why he can't be near her or touch her, even though it's the only thing he wants to do in the whole world. And as they're talking, all of a sudden, Kerrig shows up, and he has a gun, and he's pissed off. And, like, it seems a bit extreme, but, like, his character has always been just the worst. And, you know, the way he portrayed himself when they were dating and engaged, sure, that was just, like, the best version of himself, but deep down, he's always been garbage. So he shows up with the gun. He's pointing it directly in Chloe's face. And he's like, I always knew it would come to this. You and this asshole, like, it's me or him. We can't keep living like this. And the whole time he's pointing the gun at her face. And, you know, John's freaking out from inside the thing. And he's like, no, no. And then Kerrig's like, go, open that door. Go be with him if that's what you want. And she's like, you don't understand. We can't. So Kerrig's like, whatever. So he goes past her. He goes to open the door, and John's like, I'm warning you, man, don't open that door. So he opens the door, and he shoots John, and then he takes off. So he shoots him in the chest. He missed the heart, but he got some arteries. John's bleeding bad. But then, you know, John lifts up his shirt, and the hole is closing. It's healing. And he's like, okay, Chloe, you need to get out of here, because I'm using your life energy to heal myself. So you gotta go. And then Eggs, who had been kind of trailing them, was getting info about John, found out who John was finally. He shows up, and he's like, hands up, and John's like, no, you don't understand. You need to get her out here, or she's gonna die, and you're gonna die. You have to go. And there's something about his plea, the way he knows that John loves this girl, because he could tell from the research he did once he knew John's name. he agrees and he takes the girl and they leave and they get out of there, and Chloe's fine and she's in the hospital and Eggs is fine. And then back to John in the room. All of a sudden, as he's laying there, his body, you know, healing, he feels hands on top of his throat. And of course, at first we think it's Carrie come back, but it's actually Roger, the man who did this to him. And we find out that Roger's been following him this whole time, keeping tabs on him. You know, when John was looking for Roger, Roger was always right behind him, watching him. And he tries to get answers from Roger, but before he can, Roger dies, because that's just the reaction people have to John. And he doesn't get much information out of him. And then that's almost the end. The end comes when Eggs brings back the police, and he's like, okay, that boy's down there. He's probably dead because he was shot. So you're gonna go in, you know, it's over now. So they go in, but of course John's not there, but Roger is. So Eggs is like, oh great, they're gonna think, here's the old cop, senile, doesn't know what he's talking about, that it was the kidnapper in the basement, not the kidnapped. He's like, but I know it was the kidnapped. I know it was John and not Roger when I left here. And so he just kind of keeps it to himself. He's like, oops, guess I was confused. And he doesn't try to turn John in. You know, he knows, he believes that whatever's happening, he can't control it. And it's like, what are they gonna do? Arrest him and then the cops die and everyone, you know, like, so he's just like, we're just gonna let it go and see what happens and see, you know, just see what happens. So then it skips to John and Chloe. They can't be together physically, obviously, but they've kept in touch. And the two of them, they've sort of made it their mission to find someone who can help him. So it just shows them texting back and forth, and then John kind of going online every day trying to find any clues about what it is that's wrong with him, any clues as to who can help him, and then he sends her the links and they both pore over them, and then, you know, it kind of ends just like that. That's where it ends, during a conversation between the two of them where they're trying to figure out how they can live and how he can live and what they can do. So I don't know if there's going to be a second part. I have a feeling like there might be, but also if there isn't, it's okay, because it just kind of, we got the whole story. It's a sad story, but then it kind of ended with at least them having a bit of hope inside of them as they're still searching and looking and hunting for answers. So, but yeah. So there you go, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun reading this book. I have a feeling this book talk's going to be real long, so for those of you that like the stories, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you guys tomorrow.